Welcome to your favorite channel. 10 years of loyalty destroyed in a single day of betrayal. That is the equation we are breaking down today. Because of family pressure, Jenny and Sumit Singh divorced. Not long after, Jenny married a younger Indian man named Sumit. Yes, that really happened. Imagine leaving behind your children, your grandchildren, your career, and your entire life to fly halfway across the world for love. Not for safety. Not for stability, just for a promise. A promise whispered through Facebook Messenger. A promise made by a man who was not even real at first. Jenny arrived in India expecting love, warmth, and acceptance. Instead, she was met with screaming so intense it cut straight through her. She watched the mother of the man she loved threaten to drink poison rather than accept their marriage. She heard the words, "You are dead to me." And in that moment, she realized the fairy tale she fought so hard for had already turned into a nightmare. What followed was not romance. It was control disguised as tradition. It was secret conversations, quiet lies, and emotional pressure behind closed doors. It was love slowly suffocating under fear, shame, and manipulation. So we have to ask the question no one wants to ask. Can love really conquer everything? Or are some cultural divides too deep and too dangerous to cross? Today on Viva Flix M, we expose the untold truth behind Jenny and Sumit, the couple who ignored a decade of warning signs to create one of reality television's most painful love stories. We strip away the glossy editing and show the raw reality of a relationship built on deception. Why did Sumit, the man who catfished Jenny and claimed to fight for her, leave her standing alone when it came time to make things legal? Why did he hide his marriage from his parents for months? And what really happened inside that cramped house in India where love slowly turned into silence and control? We bring forward theories, insider claims, and the psychological breakdown that changes how this entire story looks. But before we go any further, do one thing. If you want the truth producers don't want exposed, if you want deep dives no one else dares to make, like this video, subscribe to Viva Flix M and turn on notifications. We dig up the secrets reality stars want buried. Now let's open the file on Jenny and Sumit. To understand how this ended, we need to understand how it started. And the beginning wasn't real at all. It started with a man named Michael Jones. Sumit did not approach Jenny as himself. He presented himself as a handsome white British man with a charming voice. From the very start, he was pretending. Jenny fell in love with a ghost, a carefully created lie designed to break down her defenses. When the truth came out and Michael Jones turned out to be Sumit, a young Indian man working in a call center, Jenny should have walked away. Logic says you leave, but she stayed. She had already invested her heart, and instead of pulling back, she held on tighter. That choice changed everything. When Jenny finally moved to India for good, she wasn't stepping into a partnership. She was stepping into a battlefield, and she had no protection. The show framed it as culture shock, but the reality was much darker. Jenny entered a household with strict rules and power structures, and she was at the very bottom. Sumit's parents did not see her as a guest. They did not see her as harmless. They saw her as a threat. A woman who stole their son, their reputation, and their future plans. The tension was not accidental. It was intentional. The kitchen scenes tell you everything. In many Indian homes, the kitchen belongs to the mother. When Sumit's mother pulled Jenny into the kitchen, it wasn't about teaching her to cook. It was about humiliation. She knew Jenny couldn't squat for long periods. She knew she wouldn't get the dough right. Failure was the point. But the worst part wasn't the cooking. It was the language. Jenny smiled, laughed nervously, and tried to please her. She believed they were bonding. But while smiling at Jenny, Sumit's mother spoke in Hindi to the camera, calling her useless, dirty, and worthless. She mocked her hygiene and her value as a woman. And where was Sumit? Standing right there. Instead of translating the cruelty, he softened it. When his mother insulted Jenny, he watered it down into harmless advice. By doing that, he allowed the abuse to continue. He was too afraid to stand up to his mother, so he let Jenny absorb the damage instead. That was the first clear warning sign. Sumit's mother is often painted as a villain, but the truth is more complicated. Her anger wasn't just about culture. It was about shame. In her community, A son marrying a woman older than his mother was humiliating. Neighbors mocked the family long before cameras arrived. She wasn't just fighting Jenny. She was fighting public disgrace. In many traditional households, the son becomes the mother's emotional anchor. Sumit wasn't just her child. He was her identity. Losing control over him felt like losing a limb. Jenny became the target of that fear. Jenny never understood this because Sumit never told her the full truth. She believed that if she tried harder, cooked better, and cleaned more, she would be accepted. She didn't realize the game was already decided. Nothing she did would ever be enough. The real issue wasn't her effort. It was her existence. This brings us to Sumit himself. Is he a victim of tradition, or is he something else entirely? There are two versions of Sumit. The Sumit online and alone with Jenny is loving, modern, and brave. He promises freedom and devotion. He tells her she is beautiful and valued. But the moment he steps into his parents' house, that man disappears. He becomes silent, scared, and obedient. Some behavioral experts believe this split benefits him. As long as Jenny and his parents are in conflict, he remains the center of attention. Both women fight for him. He never has to fully choose. At the dinner table, his parents insult Jenny's age and appearance. They mock her body. Sumit sits quietly and eats. He looks down and says nothing. That silence is a choice. He avoids conflict while keeping Jenny emotionally attached. Jenny believed Sumit was her shield. In India, she learned he was paper thin. At 60 years old, alone in a foreign country, dependent on a man who couldn't defend her, the isolation must have been crushing. Imagine how quiet that house felt at night. The silence wasn't peace. It was loneliness. And that silence tells the real story. The parents force you to sleep in separate rooms. This is not just a rule. It is humiliation. It turns a romantic relationship into something that feels like strangers sharing a house. You don't speak Hindi. You don't have a car. You have no independence. Your only support is a man who freezes the moment his mother raises her voice. But there is a darker truth from the early part of this story that was never given the weight it deserved. We have to talk about the secret wife. The first marriage. When Jenny first traveled to India believing she was visiting her boyfriend, Sumit was already married. He was hiding a wife, either in another part of the house or in a different home altogether. Think about the scale of that lie. He wasn't hiding a mistake or a bad habit. He was hiding a person. He was hiding a legal marriage. That arranged marriage was reportedly falling apart long before Jenny arrived. But according to insider rumors, Sumit used Jenny as his escape without telling her the truth. He turned her into part of an affair without her consent. She did not know she was the exit plan. Some reports claim Sumit's family lost as much as $20,000 during the divorce from his first wife. It is also rumored that Jenny helped pay part of that cost because she was desperate to be with him. If that is true, the power dynamic changes completely. It means Jenny didn't just wait for him. She paid for his freedom. She paid for the right to love him. And still, even after the first wife was gone, Sumit would not give Jenny the one thing she wanted most: legitimacy, marriage. Instead, he delayed. This leads us to one of the most questionable moments in the series, the astrologer. Just as everything is falling apart and the parents seem ready to throw Jenny out, they suddenly decide to consult a family astrologer. Astrology is deeply respected in Indian culture, so the move looks reasonable on the surface. But the timing is suspicious. After years of fierce resistance and emotional blackmail, the parents suddenly agree to let the stars decide. Then, in a shocking twist, the astrologer says the marriage could actually benefit Sumit. There is an insider theory that changes how this scene looks. What if the astrologer was paid? Or what if Sumit and his parents expected the astrologer to reject the marriage and instead got trapped when he approved it? Watch Sumit's mother's face during that reading. She doesn't look relieved. She looks confused. She wanted the stars to say no so she wouldn't have to keep fighting. When the spiritual authority approved the marriage, the parents had to switch tactics. They moved from religious resistance to emotional punishment. Since they could no longer say the stars forbade the marriage, they made Jenny's life miserable enough that they hoped she would leave on her own. And Sumit? He used the astrologer as a way to buy time. Every day spent waiting for planets to align was another day he didn't have to marry her. Jenny was kept in a permanent state of waiting. Hope can be cruel, and Sumit fed her hope in tiny pieces, never enough to make her feel secure, just enough to keep her from leaving. Jenny spent years waiting, waiting for his parents, waiting for the stars, waiting for the divorce papers, waiting for her visa, waiting for Sumit to grow a spine. She lived inside the waiting room of his indecision, and then it exploded. The screaming from the mother wasn't the real turning point. The true betrayal came later. A legal betrayal. This is where the audience stops rooting for the couple and starts fearing for Jenny. Up until now, this could be seen as a tragic love story, forbidden romance, a cultural clash. But from this point forward, it becomes something else entirely. A psychological thriller built on deception. To understand how serious this was, you need to understand the stakes. Jenny wasn't on vacation. She was on a ticking clock. Her visa was about to expire. In international relationships, a visa is everything. When it runs out, the relationship dies with it. Back in America, Jenny had sold her furniture. She had given up her apartment. She had nowhere to return to. She was living out of suitcases in a house where she was openly hated. One piece of paper stood between her and homelessness, a marriage certificate. The plan seemed simple. They would marry under the Special Marriage Act. For those unfamiliar, this is not a quick process. It requires paperwork, public notices, and a 30-day waiting period. It is designed to test commitment. Jenny was ready. She had every document. She was determined. Sumit played his role perfectly. He held her hand in the rickshaw. He smiled. He nodded when she talked about their future. He walked her into the lawyer's office like an excited groom. But behind that smile, the sabotage had already happened. According to insider sources familiar with the production, Sumit had contacted the lawyer before filming. This was not a real consultation. It was a performance. As soon as they sat down, the mood shifted. Jenny expected dates and approval. Instead, the lawyer said the process was on hold. The paperwork hadn't moved forward. Jenny was confused. She asked why, and then the truth came out. The lawyer admitted that Sumit had told him to stop the process. Let that sink in. This was not a mistake, not a delay, not bureaucracy. Sumit had secretly ordered the lawyer to pause the marriage. He had done this without telling Jenny. He had done it behind her back, away from the cameras. Imagine Jenny's body in that moment. The drop in her stomach, the blood leaving her face. The man holding her hand was the one who pulled the trigger. Why would he do this? Because Sumit is terrified of confrontation. He doesn't say no. He avoids it. Instead, he lets other people say no for him. He made the legal system the villain, so he wouldn't have to be. He wanted to say we tried and blame the system. But the lawyer told the truth. Whether he was tired of the lies or didn't want to protect Sumit on camera, he exposed everything. This is the moment Sumit stops being a victim and becomes the villain. Until now, blame could be shared. The parents, the culture, the past marriage. But this betrayal belongs to Sumit alone. He destroyed his own wedding because he was afraid. Afraid of his parents. Afraid of consequences. Afraid of choosing. The secret phone call with the lawyer proves it. He was never loyal to Jenny. He was loyal only to his own comfort. He wanted Jenny in India, but not as his wife. He wanted companionship without commitment. Love without responsibility. The fallout was immediate. Jenny walked out of the office alone. Sumit followed behind her, talking, explaining, making excuses. That image sums up their entire 10-year relationship. She absorbs the pain while he trails behind, justifying it. That day, something changed in Jenny. The fog lifted. The manipulation became clear. This is what real gaslighting looks like. He told her he was fighting to marry her while secretly working to prevent it. He controlled her reality to keep her obedient. For the first time, the power shifted. Jenny packed her things carefully. She wasn't bluffing. Her face was empty, like someone who had nothing left to lose. And then she gave him the ultimatum. She told him she was done waiting. No more delays. No more excuses. No more parents, planets, or paperwork standing between them. Either they got married immediately, or she was leaving India for good. This moment mattered because, for the first time in 10 years, Jenny stopped begging. She stopped negotiating. She stopped shrinking herself to fit inside Sumit's fear. She finally stood still and let him feel what loss actually meant. Sumit panicked. This is important to understand. Sumit does not respond to logic. He responds to fear. And the fear of losing Jenny completely was finally stronger than the fear of disappointing his parents. But even then, his reaction was not decisive. It was frantic. He cried. He apologized. He swore this time would be different. He promised action. But notice what he didn't do. He didn't immediately take responsibility. He didn't say, "I betrayed you." Instead, he framed it as confusion, pressure, stress. He made himself the victim of circumstances he created. Jenny had heard this before. For 10 years, she had heard it. But this time, something was different. She didn't comfort him. She didn't reassure him. She didn't say, "It's okay." She let the silence sit between them. And that silence terrified him more than yelling ever could. This is when the parents re-enter the story. Once it became clear that Jenny was actually leaving, the family realized something else was at risk. Control. If Jenny left, Sumit would be alone. And if he was alone, the family would lose their leverage. Suddenly, the tone shifted. The same parents who screamed, insulted, and threatened self-harm now spoke calmly. They suggested compromises. They offered conditional acceptance, not because they respected Jenny, but because they feared losing their son's obedience. This is a classic manipulation cycle. Resistance, punishment, then negotiation when control starts to slip. But even then, acceptance came with strings. Jenny was expected to stay quiet, to be grateful, to forget the past, to pretend none of the abuse ever happened. Forgiveness was demanded, not earned, and Sumit allowed it. Once again, he stood in the middle and translated pain into softer words. Once again, he chose peace over justice. Once again, Jenny was expected to absorb discomfort so everyone else could remain comfortable. They finally married, on paper. And this is where many viewers think the story ends. A hard-fought victory. Love wins. The end. But the truth is much darker. A wedding does not erase trauma. A marriage certificate does not undo years of manipulation. And commitment made under pressure is not the same as commitment made freely. After the marriage, the power imbalance didn't disappear. It simply changed shape. Jenny was now legally tied to a man who had proven, again and again, that he avoids responsibility when things get hard. She was older, financially vulnerable, and living in a country where she had no support system outside of him. Sumit, on the other hand, got what he wanted. Jenny stayed. His parents stayed in his life, and he never truly had to choose. That is the pattern. Whenever forced to choose, Sumit delays until someone else gives in. And that someone has almost always been Jenny. Even after marriage, the same behaviors showed up. Excuses, half promises, emotional withdrawal. When conflict appeared, he shut down. When Jenny needed reassurance, he offered silence. This isn't accidental. This is a coping strategy he has used his entire life. Avoid, delay, deflect. And the cost of that strategy has always been paid by the woman who loved him most. Jenny gave up everything for this relationship. Her home, her savings, her family, her sense of safety. She aged in uncertainty. She lived in fear of visas, rejection, and abandonment. And yet, she was constantly treated as if she was asking for too much. This is the most painful part of the story. Jenny didn't ask for luxury. She didn't ask for perfection. She asked for honesty, protection, and commitment. Basic things. And even those were given reluctantly. Many people ask why Jenny stayed so long. The answer is not stupidity. It's psychological attachment. Trauma bonding. When pain and hope are mixed together over long periods of time, leaving feels harder than staying. Every time Sumit pulled away, Jenny tried harder. Every time he promised change, she believed him. Because admitting the truth meant admitting that 10 years of sacrifice may have been for nothing. That realization is devastating. So she kept going. She kept waiting. She kept forgiving. And Sumit kept benefiting from that forgiveness. This story is not just about culture. It's not just about age gaps or family pressure. It's about power. About what happens when one person consistently avoids accountability and another person consistently absorbs the damage. Sumit was not trapped. He made choices. Quiet choices. Hidden choices. Choices that protected him while hurting Jenny. And Jenny was not weak. She was hopeful. She believed love meant endurance. She believed loyalty would eventually be rewarded. But love should not feel like survival. If there is one lesson in this story, it is this. Love does not require you to disappear. Commitment does not demand silence. And sacrifice should never be one-sided. Jenny crossed oceans for a promise. Sumit couldn't cross a room to defend her. That is the truth beneath the edit. And that is why this story still hurts to watch.